You should really read them. They're really good. That's literally TDS. Like most loony leftists. That's TDS. You have to have character to debate it first, though. Like attacking ICE agents with your car? Or do it now. I don't care. Camera does everything backwards. Yeah, this was supposed to be out a while ago, but I was in YouTube prison.
Specifically,
Really want you to hear the next guy's name.
against Trump era
No
politics.
combat badges like a combat infantryman's badge or even a CAB. So I stopped doing that, but I probably shouldn't have. I probably should put them at the end of the videos.
Continued
For absolutely nothing.
NATO running out.
And more civilians have died since we bombed Libya, so you make it make sense.
People make today.
I had to turn off muting the video because I want the video to keep rolling.
Outrage.
Seems to be, the internet seems to be running pretty good tonight. By the way, Messiah is about Barack Obama's presidency and what a total idiot he was. Actually, he wasn't the idiot. The people that voted for him twice were. Need another cold snack.
that they were ready to torch.
Looks like you're going to have to use the link in the description for the books. Why did you marry a Brazilian? Fourth wave feminism and KFC.
And the applause.
From people with no morals. Someone who's willing to castrate a child doesn't have morals. Another they, them, by the way. You loony leftists are some violent motherfuckers. Hold on, I'm glad you showed up then. If reading more than 3 sentences feels like cardio, that's not my problem. That's your attention span. Here's the short version for the comment section crowd. Grown-ups talk facts, law, objectives, and consequences. People who can't do that count words and pretend it's an argument. And yes, this is where I remind you, if you want more of this organized arguments, not bumper sticker thinking, my books are all in one place. Go to click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. That page is my library. Click a cover, pick your poison, politics, culture, history, economics, the whole ecosystem. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. Now, I want questions during the week. Drop your questions in the comments, send them in wherever you follow me, and be specific.
I've tried doing
live.
live. This is the first time I've tried doing live in a long time. I do like the fact that I can. I do have it pre-recorded.
Step by step.
When the ideas happen,
if it's worth discussing, I'll put it in an upcoming episode. If the bulwark wants to be taken seriously, here's the standard. Drop the bumper sticker tone, state the facts, separate allegations from verified reporting, apply the same moral math no matter who's in office. Until then, buckle up isn't an analysis. It's a disguise for having no standards. I'm the Super Gringo. This is Shawn thinking out loud.
Welcome to The Debate. Our discussion today centers on the psychological and civic consequences
one of my books.
Applying specific intellectual frameworks that assign moral responsibility and sometimes explicitly guilt-based primarily on racial group membership, especially the concept of whiteness within systems of racial hierarchy.
And the core question we're grappling
with
is,
it's pretty bad to be white nowadays, isn't it?
Does framing racial identity itself as intrinsically compromised encourage the necessary moral awareness and accountability required to dismantle systemic racism? Or does this very approach, fundamentally impede genuine progress by generating maladaptive psychological
By the way,
and
Carol
civic
just showed up
outcomes?
on one of
I hold
Grumpy's
that
posts,
confronting
so
this
I'll be
collective
dealing with
complicity
that
is
soon.
absolutely necessary to reveal the depth of structural racism. I think we have to move past these superficial, individualist understandings of prejudice that really just protect the status quo.
And I come at it from a different angle. I'll be arguing that identity-based moral accusation corrodes the mutual trust required for collective action. It diminishes individual agency and ultimately undermines the possibility of achieving sustainable, constructive civic reform.
When we talk about systemic racism, we are discussing institutions and structures built, often historically and currently, on racial hierarchy.
They can never tell you the current ones,
all
except
members
Donald
of the
Trump.
dominant racial group are in effect beneficiaries and, well, by definition, complicit in that system. This is not about determining personal malice or individual intent. It's about acknowledging the reality of a structural advantage.
Right.
This perspective is grounded in legal and social theory, like the concept that whiteness as property grants unearned moral and material advantage. So the assignment of collective involvement, or what I'd call an inherited
You all
moral
feel guilty
debt,
for being white?
exists
'Cause
not
I
because of
don't,
anything
and I live
an
in a brown
individual
country.
did yesterday, but because of the structure they participate in today. Without this recognition of a deep structural debt, efforts to address issues, they just remain ineffective, forever focusing on isolated bad actors instead of the system itself. And crucially, when we observe discomfort or resistance in educational or training settings, the phenomena often labeled defensiveness or fragility, we must view this not as a failure of the teaching, but as evidence that the framework is successfully challenging those deeply entrenched, naive views of individual innocence. The discomfort is the necessary friction of genuine moral confrontation.
That's an interesting point, but my concern lies precisely in the mechanism of that moral confrontation. I agree we must acknowledge systemic advantage, but the danger lies in transitioning from targeted accountability related to specific policies to a global moral condemnation based on
Exactly
identity.
why I wrote the book.
The framework you describe encourages
Everybody
global
wants
shame,
you to feel guilty
the debilitating
for
feeling that
something
I
you
am
had nothing
fundamentally
to do
bad,
with. Also,
simply
I've
because
never
of an
owned a
identity I
slave.
cannot change.
I don't know about you,
This is
but
corrosive.
I'm pretty much against
It
slavery.
is fundamentally different
Always
from
have been since the
constructive
day I was
guilt,
born,
which is tied to specific,
I didn't even
fixable,
know about
wrongful
slavery.
acts. I did something wrong, and I can repair it. When you treat racial identity as a kind of structural original sin, it cannot be repaired through concrete restitution or changed behavior. It's permanent. And the predictable psychological outcomes of this are anxiety, withdrawal, performative compliance, and, well, high levels of reactance, or backlash.
These responses are just counterproductive and undermine genuine moral growth and the self-efficacy required for someone to actually engage in difficult, sustained institutional change. If you feel permanently tainted, why bother trying to fix anything?
I sent in one of my books to have it debated.
Let's dig into that distinction between constructive guilt and corrosive shame, because I think that is the crux of the practical problem. When training rituals like privilege walks or mandatory caucusing socially enforce this collective guilt, it induces a global sense of being permanently tainted. The individual is made to feel perpetually deficient, not just that they've made a mistake. So how does that foster moral agency? When individuals who sincerely want to contribute are told that their efforts at fairness or bridge building are preemptively coded as centering themselves or as further evidence of privilege, a failure regardless of intent, their self-efficacy is immediately undermined. I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning. This psychological pressure often fosters what behavioral scientists call learned helplessness, leading to disengaged compliance or outright refusal to participate in the process.
Soft racism
I see why you think that. But let me offer a different perspective.
Democrats
we
need
must
them
ask
stupid,
what that sincere desire to contribute is trying to protect. Resistance to the collective framing is often an attempt to cling to the myth of individual innocence, allowing participants to avoid necessary responsibility for the structural reality that benefits them. The focus isn't necessarily on making people feel permanently bad. It's on forcing them to acknowledge a permanent structural reality, that the debt exists and must be accounted for. Because the sin is structural and systemic, not merely behavioral, the only acceptable posture is ongoing acknowledgement and allyship. If participants question whether all disparities are purely products of racism or whether individual intent should mitigate the moral debt, this is immediately interpreted as a failure to acknowledge complicity.
Maybe
the
to a few
goal is
individuals,
to enforce
but
the
not
norm
to
that the
a
structural
certain
reality is an ongoing
group of
debt
people.
that requires continuous payment and active deference.
But how does chronic, identity-based shame actually resolve a structural debt? In behavioral terms, shame, especially global shame, is often associated with avoidance.
For
Guilt,
something you've
conversely,
never
drives
done.
reparative action. If the only available action is performative acknowledgement, endless deference without concrete pathways for restitution,
By the way,
you
this
are
book was
incentivizing
actually banned
institutional
once
theater,
on
not
Amazon.
justice. We should be
Under a
aiming
different
for a
title.
system where
I had to rewrite
accountability is
it and
tied to
kinda
specific
soften it up.
institutional actions the individual can influence, not an immutable status. If the individual feels that their action is perpetually insufficient and will only ever be judged as centering themselves, they withdraw agency. You are creating permanent moral debtors who are then, ironically, disempowered from collective action.
That's a compelling critique of the psychological mechanism, but I would argue that withdrawal and defensiveness are simply the cost of revealing the truth. The structural inequality is so vast that attempting to maintain comfortable individualist agency during this confrontation
If there wasn't
is, well, it's counterproductive.
inequality,
The framework recognizes that
if
we
there were
must
true
move beyond
equality,
the
I'd
current
be
civic
playing for the
arrangement.
NBA
And
right
that
now.
psychological impact on the individual naturally flows into the civic arena. Specifically, how does this affect open deliberation and mutual trust?
Well, I maintain that the framework accurately reflects existing power dynamics. We must be clear. Cross-racial encounters are already moralized by structural inequality and historical debt. To prioritize a superficial sense of civic comfort is to prioritize the maintenance of the existing unequal civic order. The adversarial standoffs and polarization we observe are simply the inevitable consequences of telling the truth about that historical debt. If the truth is uncomfortable and divisive, then the current civic norms must be the problem, not the truth-telling.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because it assumes that polarization is the necessary and, more importantly, the helpful outcome.
Exactly.
Contending that the
Hey,
truth
Farmer,
must be
that's exactly
adversarial
why I wrote the
actively
book.
corrodes
I was
the mutual
tired of
trust
hearing
needed for
about
shared
it.
civic
I'm
responsibility.
still tired of hearing about
If
it.
one group is scripted as permanent moral debtors and the other as permanent moral creditors,
I
cross-racial
don't owe
encounters risk
anything to
becoming what
anyone.
some critics
my
call
kids don't owe
quasi-tribal
anything to
tribunals.
anyone.
And what do you mean by that?
Conversely, I'm
When
tired
I
of
say
hearing I'm proud to be white.
quasi-tribal tribunals, I mean
from
that these
idiots.
interactions
I'm proud to be
function
white.
less as
Well, what
forums
color were
for
your parents,
democratic
stupid?
problem solving,
White?
where we
Well,
share
then
a
you
common
didn't have a
identity
fucking
as
thing to do with
citizens
it. Go
working
sit
toward a
down,
common
stupid.
policy goal, and more as judgment rituals focused solely on moral ranking and assigning fault. This framework replaces a shared
Tell me
civic
something
identity
you've done
as
that you can be
colleagues,
proud of.
neighbors, and fellow citizens with a moral hierarchy. The predictable outcome is not reconciliation or constructive reform, but a hardening of antagonistic identities on all sides. When trust breaks down, cooperation on practical policy issues, like zoning or education reform, becomes impossible.
But can we truly speak of shared civic identity when one
It's
group
the same
benefits
during
from
Pride
the
Month.
system
I hate Pride
and
Month.
the other group
What are you
is
proud of?
systematically
Gobbling cock?
disadvantaged by it? Isn't the concept of
Supposedly
a
you were
shared
born gay,
colleague
right? Yep.
identity
Well, then
merely
you didn't have a
way
fucking
to
thing
paper
to do
over
with
the
it. Go sit
foundational
down,
economic
stupid.
and social disparities? To prioritize trust is to prioritize stability over justice. The moral hierarchy is already there, built into the system. The framework simply makes it explicit, and that explicitness is necessary to achieve structural change.
Let's shift our focus specifically to the institutional impact of this lack of trust and the resulting identity-based guilt, the practical effect on deliberation. The psychological response to high identity-based guilt is withdrawal and self-censorship, which leads directly to what social scientists call a spiral of silence. Individuals learn quickly that honest questions about evidence, policy trade-offs, or the unintended consequences of proposed interventions will be interpreted as manifestations of fragility or bigotry. If I raise a rational concern about the cost or scalability of a diversity initiative, I risk being morally labeled. Rationally, people self-censor. This significantly distorts institutional feedback and policy learning. Institutions cannot effectively address problems or evaluate interventions when critical, moderate, or skeptical voices that may hold key insights on implementation, are muted for fear of moral condemnation. This produces institutional echo chambers and ineffective policy.
That's an interesting analysis, but I believe we should frame this not merely as self-censorship, but as a necessary shift from talking to listening, which is itself a moral act. White participants who benefit from the existing
Pretty much.
structural
I should
dominance
know you
are often
gobblecock.
instructed that
Maybe
stepping
if we're
back and
friends
listening
and I know
is a
you're
moral duty in these
significant
settings.
other than that,
Why?
if we
Because
work
open
together,
argument, when
I
based
should know
on
whether you do a
fundamentally
good job
unequal
or not.
premises
But
and
other
an
than that, I
unacknowledged
should know
system
your
of
sex
advantage
life.
simply reinforces dominant
That's like you
views.
walking up and asking me,
Open
does your
argument
wife
in
like
this
to gobble,
context
suck
can
cock?
easily
And I hit you
become
in the mouth.
defensive denial. Silence, when properly applied, can be a form of virtuous deference, necessary to recenter voices of color and allow space for the
I
experiences
have gay
of harm
friends.
to be heard
I know they're gay
without
because,
immediate
well, we're
rebuttal or
friends.
deflection.
Other than
It
that,
is a
you don't need to hold a
rebalancing of the
fucking parade.
conversational scale, not a failure of free speech.
The issue isn't about deference, it's about competence. Institutions must be competent in addressing systemic problems. If policy debates must adhere to a moral script where challenging assumptions is forbidden, the institution loses its capacity for critical
Once
self-correction.
people figure out that
For
stupid
example,
doesn't have
if
a
a
skin
program
color,
designed to
there'll
address
only be
disparity
two
is not
groups of
working,
people on
and
the
raising
planet.
that fact is coded as
Smart people and
defensiveness,
stupid people.
then the institution will
Racism
continue
dies.
to fund a failed program. The goal is to fix redlining or inequitable policing, and fixing those complex problems requires all available cognitive resources and honest feedback, even from those who might benefit from the status quo. If we cannot honestly discuss trade-offs and failures because of identity-based moral pressure, we are not just achieving a moral victory through silence, we are ensuring policy failure.
If the goal is sustainable justice,
I like to send my
we must
books
look at
into these people
alternative paths
and have
that
them debate them.
prioritize agency
That way I know
and shared
whether I
civic
wrote a good
purpose
book or not.
over identity-based moral indictment. The material suggests focusing on specific wrongs and institutional responsibility. For instance, aggressively addressing exclusionary zoning, discriminatory lending, or
Exactly.
police
If
accountability,
you're like a racist
rather than
banker,
generalized guilt.
people shouldn't be banking
It also
with you.
suggests
You
building
should
on
go out of fucking
superordinate
business.
goals and common identities, like citizen, colleague, or community member, to foster collaboration. Restorative justice models, oriented toward concrete repair and restitution for specific harm, are also superior. These evidence-based, universalist reforms invite everyone to co-steward a constitutional order, judging people by what they do rather than casting entire generations as permanently stained by their birth identity.
That's a compelling argument, and I concede the necessity of practical targeted policy reform.
You are absolutely correct that we must fix redlining and
really
discriminatory
simple.
policing.
Life, liberty,
However,
and the
I
pursuit.
maintain that
A lot of
without the moral
motherfuckers forget
awareness
that
generated
pursuit
by the
part
collective guilt
of
framework,
happiness.
the explicit
They mistake
acknowledgement of
pursuit for
structural
give me.
complicity and inherited debt, these policy reforms will always be superficial and temporary. They will be administrative fixes applied to a fundamentally moral problem. You are asking for the fruit of justice, the specific policies, without accepting the moral root required to grow and sustain it. Ask yourself this: does simply focusing on individual policies divorced from the explicit recognition of identity-based structural advantage truly address the deeper issue of a society built on whiteness as a foundational moral advantage? If you don't acknowledge the depth of the stain, you can't truly clean the system. So, to sum up, I reiterate that confronting systemic complicity requires acknowledging the moral dimension of group identity, the standing stain. The resulting discomfort, the sense of collective debt, is a necessary catalyst for awareness of the deep structural debts owed, allowing for a truly transformative justice that goes beyond mere administrative policy changes.
And I reiterate that accountability is most effective when tied to specific actions and institutional reforms that people can actually influence. Identity-based guilt produces chronic shame, which is psychologically corrosive and actively weakens the civic bonds required for honest, sustainable problem-solving and shared civic responsibility.
This dude gets why
We
I wrote
need
the
justice
book.
that encourages agency and measurable repair, not permanent, identity-based indictment.
We have established today that the core tension here lies in the fundamental trade-off between, on one hand, the depth and rigor of systemic critique, and on the other, the need for pro-social, institutionally stable engagement to enact and sustain meaningful change.
Exactly. And the evidence presented clearly requires the listener to weigh whether institutionalizing identity-based moral responsibility ultimately achieves genuine shared justice or whether it risks replacing problem-focused civic dialogue with ritualized moral theater and escalating antagonism.
I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo, and this is Shawn Thinking Out Loud. Today is Tuesday, January 6, 2026, and it's 11:09 a.m. here in Araquém, Sidónia, Brazil. Now, let's talk about what everyone is talking about. The United States just carried out a military operation in Venezuela, and Nicolas Maduro is now in U.S. custody facing U.S. charges.
They were dancing
So the question
down
people
here.
keep asking is simple. Did the president have the authority to do this without Congress? Quick disclaimer, I'm not your lawyer. This is political analysis, and yes, I can make mistakes, so double check anything you hear online. First thing, people keep calling it the Title II. That's not the Constitution. What they mean is Article II, the section that makes the president the commander-in-chief. And here's the core argument the administration is making. Under Article II, the president can use U.S. forces to respond to threats, protect Americans, protect U.S. interests, and conduct what they call a limited operation. Limited in nature, limited in scope, limited in duration. In other words, they're saying this is not a full-scale war in the constitutional sense. Second argument, they're framing it as law enforcement. They're saying Maduro and associates were under U.S. indictment for narco-terrorism. This was closer to executing search warrants than launching
Pretty
a war.
much the same thing.
That
they
is
got,
the claim, and it's controversial because critics respond, an indictment is not a magic permission slip to send the military into another
country. Same thing they did with him.
Third argument, strategy. The administration is pointing to its Western
Maduro's
Hemisphere
military was a
posture
joke.
and the renewed emphasis on the Monroe Doctrine framework. Some are even calling it Don-Roe Doctrine. The basic message is the U.S. intends to reassert dominance in the region, push back hostile foreign influence, and prevent
as we
threats
should. I'm
near
sorry,
US
but
borders.
it's on our
Now
border.
here's where the constraints
it's close
hit.
enough to launch
Even if you
missiles.
accept broad Article II power, the War Powers Resolution still exists. The law says, in general terms, if U.S. forces are introduced into hostilities, the president has to notify Congress quickly, and absent authorization, the operation can't just run forever. And that is why you're seeing a War Powers Resolution moving in Congress right now. As of today, the Senate is preparing to vote on a measure that would require congressional approval for any further military action tied to Venezuela.
House, maybe?
Then there's international
I think that
law.
resolution
The
failed,
latest argument from critics is UN charter rules generally prohibit using force against another country's territorial integrity or political independence unless you have UN Security Council authorization or a valid self-defense claim. And critics are saying this doesn't meet the self-defense standard. This looks like aggression. This violates international law. Now, here's the part that drives me crazy. Watch the double standard. Because a lot of the same people screaming today were silent when Barack Obama expanded drone warfare across multiple countries. And they were also very comfortable with legal gymnastics during Libya. Let's be accurate about Libya. Obama had UN Security Council authorization for the Libya operation.
That's my biggest
but he did not
pet peeve,
get a clear
double
specific
standards.
authorization from Congress. And the administration argued the operation did not rise to the level of hostilities under the War Powers Framework, even while U.S. forces were
What
providing
was
critical
Libya's
military
threat
functions.
to the United
That
States?
sparked serious legal and
I'll wait.
constitutional criticism at the time. So if your position is Congress must authorize this, then be consistent. If your position is presidents can act under Article 2 when it's limited, then be consistent. What I'm not interested in is it's legal when my team does it and illegal when your team does it. That's not constitutional principle. That's a team sport. Here's my bottom line. If Congress wants to reclaim war powers, then Congress needs to act like Congress. Debate, vote, authorize, or cut it off. And if presidents want to claim Article 2 authority,
exactly, brother.
they should be forced to define the mission
why
clearly,
I cannot
the scope,
stand the
the
loony
objectives,
left
the
at all.
timeline, and the exit plan.
I'm good
Because trust me,
with
it's not a strategy.
rules. Even
Now,
if I don't like
deeper,
them,
long
as
form
long
version
as
of how
they
I think
apply
about
to
this stuff,
everyone.
history, foreign policy, law, economics. My books are where I put the full arguments. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. You can preview the titles and pick up what you want from my books page.
Well, some rules,
And I want to make
no,
this
like
show
castrating
interactive.
kids is
Send me your
pretty
questions
much
during the week.
out there.
Drop them in the comments or message them in whatever platform you follow me on.
Oh, Trump
Put Shawn
should go down to
thinking out
the
loud question
White House pool,
so I can
walk
spot it
across
faster.
it without getting his
I'll take
shoes
the best
wet.
questions and
You know what
answer
the
them in
media would say?
upcoming segments.
Look at that, Trump
I'm
can't
the Super
swim.
Gringo, and this is Shawn thinking out loud. They were dancing down here when Trump did that, by the way. So all those people protesting in New York can, pretty much suck every Brazilian's dick. Today is Wednesday, January 7th, 2026, and it is 5:23 p.m. here in Ariquemes, Rondônia, Brazil. Welcome back to Shawn Thinking Out Loud. I'm Shawn Armstrong, a.k.a. the Super Gringo. Before we get into this segment, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. That takes you to my books and projects. All right, let's talk about Carol Sanders, if that's his real name. This guy kept repeating the same January 6th
I'll be dealing
lie
with
over
this
and
douche
over and over,
nozzle
like a
as soon as
broken
this is
record with
over
a GED,
in a short,
and I
since I'm
debunked
back
him
on
4
YouTube.
times with sources. And here's the part that matters. When someone loses the argument, they don't bring facts. They bring repetition, because that's all they've got. And by the way, your virtual signaling about January 6th ended the minute Charlie Kirk hit the ground. Now, Carol says he refused to go to Mar-a-Lago to meet Trump because he was too busy hanging out with Oprah Winfrey. Okay, here's my question, and I'm saying this as a question. Was he hanging out with Oprah and Epstein? Because when somebody starts bragging about celebrity proximity like it's a personality, I start wondering
Yeah, a
what
guy with
circles they're
88
really running in.
followers on Instagram
No receipts, no proof.
was invited to
Then
Mar-a-Lago.
stop name dropping like it's evidence. And now, according to Carol, none of us can do what he does. This is the same guy who told people he was peer-reviewed, but there's no record of it anywhere.
He's still waiting on his
Yeah.
yellow belt for him to come back.
That's not peer-reviewed. That's trust me, bro. And now he's claiming he can do anything physical I can do. So I had to point out, it sounds like he's admitting he's an idiot. Because, physically. Because confidence isn't competence, it's just noise. Especially when it's coming from someone who can't document their own claims. So I gave him a challenge. Bore sight and shoot an M1 Abrams tank at night. If you can do anything, Carol, let's see it. And then I sent him a yellow belt karate test sheet because I'm generous like that. So now we wait. Well, I also pointed out another thing I can obviously do that he can't. Cite my sources. I guess he's training for his yellow belt test. And Carol, since you keep acting like you're everybody's intellectual superior, I'll remind you, now, to everyone else watching, if you want to support what I do, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. That page has my books, titles like Bloodstained Banner, Dismantling the Republic, The American Left, From Liberalism to Despotism, Understanding Capitalism, Messiah, From Jobs to Justice, The Biden Crime Family, Dragon Kempo 2.0, and more. Also, send me your questions during the week. Drop them in the comments, message them, however you do it on this platform, and I'll pull a few for upcoming segments of Shawn Thinking Out Loud. Because if you're bringing real questions, we'll bring real answers. And if you're bringing nonsense like Carol, we'll bring receipts and a yellow belt test. I'm the Super Gringo, and this was Shawn Thinking Out Loud. Thursday, January 8th, 2026, 4:08 p.m., Aracame, Sidonia, Brazil. I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo, and this is Shawn Thinking Out Loud. If you like what I do here, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to check out my books and support the channel. This segment, Media Forensics, How Breaking News Warps Judgment, because breaking news doesn't just inform you, it pushes you emotionally, politically, and cognitively.
I'm surprised Carol doesn't put breaking news on all of his posts.
A current example: the Venezuela raid coverage and the flood of dramatic footage and claims that followed. Here's the skill. Separate events, claims, and interpretations before you let someone rent space in your head. Box 1. Events. These are things that happened in the real world, regardless of what you think about them. Example, reports describe a U.S. operation in Caracas, and there's widely reported fallout involving detentions, oil seizures, and international reaction. Box 2. Claims. These are statements about events, often made quickly, sometimes strategically, and frequently without
made a
full
class
evidence.
out of this, really.
Example, this footage shows the raid. This proves X, this confirms Y, and here's the uncomfortable part. A lot of circulating clips were old, miscaptioned, or outright fake. Box 3. Interpretations. This is the story someone builds on top. Motives, morality, inevitability, heroes, villains, everything that triggers your tribal reflexes. Breaking news tries to shove you directly into Box 3. Professional level media forensics drags you back to Box 1. Here's my verification ladder. Simple enough for normal people, effective enough to embarrass cable news. Step 1. Identify the original source. Who filmed it? Who uploaded it first? Is there a timestamp, a location, metadata? If you can't answer that, you're not verifying, you're hoping. Step 2. Separate video exists from video proofs. Footage can be real and still be irrelevant, incomplete, or framed to mislead. And again, some Venezuela-related footage being shared was flagged as old or fake. Step 3. Look for independent confirmation. Not 5 people repeating the same rumor. Independent, different pipelines, different incentives. Step 4. Update your confidence level. Not true or false. Use likely, plausible, uncertain, unlikely, debunked. If you aren't adjusting confidence as facts change, you're not analyzing, you're campaigning. Now we talk incentives, because incentives explain 80% of breaking news behavior. Politicians want credit, leverage, fear, or permission. Agencies want budget, authority, and public justification. Outlets want attention because attention is revenue and status. In this Venezuela cycle, you can see how incentives collide. Operations, oil seizures, competing narratives, and international pressure, each actor pushing their version of what this means. So when you hear a confident claim in hour 1 of a story, ask, what does this person gain if I believe it right now? This is the part that separates grown-ups from the online mob. What would change my mind? Say it out loud. For this kind of story, mine would be things like
for the loony left,
primary
you would actually have to have a mind
consistent
first.
Independent reporting from multiple credible outlets.
authenticated footage with clear provenance.
They're so brainwashed, I think
on
the
record statements that can be checked later. If the answer is nothing would change my mind, then congratulations, what you have is not an opinion, it's a religion. Here's your takeaway rule. If the headline makes you angry in the first 10 seconds, pause. That's the point where you're most easy to manipulate. Put it into boxes: event, claim, interpretation, then climb the ladder: source, context, confirmation, confidence. Now your turn.
This into a
Drop
course.
your questions during the week. Send me examples of breaking news clips you're seeing, especially ones that feel engineered to trigger outrage. And I want you to answer this in the comments. What evidence would change your mind about a major breaking story you care about? Also, if you want to support what I'm building, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. That's where you'll find my books. I'm the Super Gringo. This is Shawn, Thinking Out Loud. See you next segment.
It is Friday, January 9th, 2026, 7:17 a.m. in overcast Arequipa, Sidonia, Brazil. I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo, and this is Shawn, Thinking Out Loud. If you want to support the channel and check out my books, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. Again, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. Today, how to debate from steel man to destroying the argument. Not winning by yelling, winning by thinking. Debate has two versions. Version 1, performance. You're auditioning for your side. Applause.
Yes, there was a guy on one of Grumpy's videos that said, "Why are you repeating what I say?"
You're testing claims about
making sure I
reality.
understand the
truth is the
babbling
goal.
bullshit
Most
you're putting
people
out
confuse
before
the
I
two,
destroy it.
and then act shocked when the conversation goes nowhere. Today, I'm giving you a method that works in both worlds. It makes you harder to fool and harder to beat. Steel man means this. You restate the other side's argument so clearly and fairly that they say, "Yes, that's exactly what I mean." If they say, "No, that's not my view," you don't get to criticize it yet. You've been shadowboxing. Here's the steel man checklist. 1. State their claim in one sentence. No sarcasm, no adjectives.
Another thing I should make into
2.
a class.
List their strongest supporting reason. 3 is enough. 3. State the best evidence they would use. 4. State what would convince them they're wrong. If they can't answer that, the argument is faith, not reasoning. And here's your advantage. When you steel man, you learn the structure. Once you see the structure, you can break it. Every argument has one piece holding the entire thing up. The load-bearing beam is usually one of these: a definition, a casual claim, a hidden assumption, a false comparison, or a missing trade-off. Your job is to find the one piece that, if removed, collapses the whole building. If you don't know what the load-bearing beam is, you'll waste time attacking decorations. Destroy doesn't mean insult. It means defeat the logic so thoroughly that a serious person must update. Here are the 4 clean kill methods. Method 1. Attack.
You notice I said serious person.
Show a key premise is false, unsupported, or exaggerated. Method 2. Attack the inference. Even if the facts are true, the conclusion doesn't follow. Method 3. Attack the framing. They're asking the wrong question, using the wrong comparison, or
the left
hiding
like
the
to use
real
the second
trade-off.
one the most.
Method 4. Present a superior alternative explanation. Same facts, different cause. If your explanation predicts the evidence better, their story becomes unnecessary. And here's the discipline that separates adults from internet goblins. After you land the critique, you say, "Here's the strongest version of my counter-argument. Tell me what you would change. Tell me what would change your mind." That forces the conversation into reality. Trap 1. Arguing definitions without admitting it. If you're fighting over words, say so. Trap 2. Confusing examples for proof. A story is not a statistic. A clip is not the full event. Trap 3. Motive mind reading.
You don't need to
Dave
guess
is
motives.
all about
you need
clips.
to test claims. If you can't beat the argument without calling someone evil, you're not debating. You're coping. Here's a template. Use it word for word. Let me steel man you. Your claim is X. Your reasons are A, B, and C. The best evidence for that is D. Is that accurate? Then, okay. The key assumption here is Y. If Y is wrong, the conclusion collapses. Here's why Y is weak. And here's the alternative explanation. Then the finishing line. What evidence would change your mind? That's how you debate like a serious person, without theatrics. Now, questions during the week. Drop them in the comments. Send me arguments you want steel-manned and dismantled. Tell me 3 things. 1. What's the claim? 2. Where did you see it? Article, clip, comment thread. 3. What do you think the load-bearing beam is? And if you want to support the channel and check out my books, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo. This is Shawn thinking out loud. All right, here's what we covered. 1. TDS is not a clinical diagnosis. It's political slang, and it's often used as a shortcut to avoid debate. 2. Disliking Trump isn't mental illness. It's an opinion, but if you accuse someone of serious crimes, you need serious evidence, not slogans, not rage, not internet shame tactics. 3. We broke down label stacking, pervert, pedophile, traitor, draft dodger, warlord, and explained why that tactic is designed to trap the conversation. Because once someone drops the most extreme accusation, any pushback gets framed as defending evil. That's not reasoning, that's coercion. 4. We addressed the shock line move, the kind of sentence that's engineered to make you angry and stop thinking. And the standard stays the same. If you've got proof, present it. If you don't, stop performing moral superiority. Bottom line, if your politics requires you to abandon evidence, your politics is the problem. Now I want your questions during the week. Drop them in the comments. Tell me what you want next. Do you want a full breakdown on propaganda by label? How to argue with standards instead of emotions? Or how to criticize policy without turning into a headline machine? And if you want my books, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. Books by Super Gringo Books and Shawn Armstrong. I'm Shawn Armstrong, the Super Gringo. This is Shawn thinking out loud. See you next time.
Welcome to the noise in my head, where ideas spark like lightning threads. No script, no map, just let it flow. Thinking out loud, let's see where we go. Welcome to the noise in my head, where ideas spark like lightning threads. No script, no map, just let it flow. Thinking out loud, let's see where we go.
I think I kind of like this format. It's pre-recorded, but because I want it to be timely. But I'm live too, where I can actually comment on what was happening at the time. This was supposed to be like 3 weeks ago, but I'm in YouTube jail. So I think now I'm going to end this live stream and go over and mess with Carol Sanders, the famous chainsaw carver. 88 followers on Instagram. That's famous. I have more on my band page that's, I haven't been on in 6 years. So, yeah. I'll be here every Wednesday now. Hopefully, I won't upset YouTube again. Peace out. To be honest, HR Farmer, I would like people to read my books more. You know what I mean? That's where the knowledge is. This is just me, doing whatever. The books are where the knowledge is. That's where the knowledge is. That's where I do the most work. Every day, my wife gets mad, but when I die, there's going to be a body of work that people can look at and go, well, he was right. As a matter of fact, Eric Hames just opened a library. I'm thinking of going down there to see if any of my books are in there, and if they aren't, requesting them. Just, I have some on theology. I have some on Brazilian history. I have some on, if Brazilians want to move to America, I've written a book on that too, traditions and, laws and stuff. So, yeah, maybe I'll go down there and see if they have any of my books. Matter of fact, this book, this one I just got the other day that I published for Brazilians to teach them English in their own home. But Carol Sanders is so much smarter than I am. Gives me a headache thinking about it. But I'm going to go over there and see what he has to say and then shred him with maybe a short or two. But thanks for stopping by, IH Farmer. It was cool. Wish I could get more people on the channel and we could actually start discussing stuff. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of the books. I've written fiction too. Some science fiction. My sister-in-law, who's a professor in Brazil, read my book on AI and the fall of mankind, which is a very short book. It's I think it was 80 pages. It's called the Fall of the Veil, and it's about a woman who was absorbed into AI, and of course it's in the future, and the world collapses because of it. And she loved the book. So I think it's a good book. It's available in English and Portuguese. Then I have a series on AI again, where they use AI to control soldiers. And then I have another book on bullying. That one kind of autobiographical, but the guy goes around and basically confronts all his bullies, and he finds out that some of them have grown up, some of them haven't, and it's just So I write a lot of stuff just because lived a long time and I've done a lot. Dave, the millionaire, asked me, I think you're an engineer. No. I've been a professional wrestler, a ghost hunter, a executive protection specialist, a martial artist, what else have I? A gunsmith. I've been did I mention ghost hunter? Writer, obviously, an author. Musician. I play guitar. I play some bass, and I play a drum. I could keep a beat on a drum, but you're not going to see me doing solos and fills. Yeah, I can. I can do 3/4 time, 4/4 time. That kind of thing. And then I obviously 23 years in the military. What else have I done? I've been an emergency management specialist. So when Carol lectures me on nuclear stuff, I can't build a bomb, but I know that the shit he's saying is bullshit. So. But I think I'm going to go over and check out what Carol Sanders has to say. And, matter of fact, Dave tonight asked me where I get my sources. I was like, multiple sources. Matter of fact, I list them. Why? Because, well, I can. So, yeah, I think he's over on Grumpy's latest video, which was not political at all, but we were making fun of him. I don't know if he knows we're making fun of him. I think he's kind of schizophrenic, to be honest. But yeah, I'm going to call this a night. How do you like the new logo? That's going to be the new intro to the podcast, with the new music titled "No More Mr. Nice Guy." So I ought to put that up, but I'll do a short on it or something maybe. But thanks for stopping by, IH Farmer. And I'm going to go over and see what Carol Sanders has to say. Maybe I'll do some screenshots of his 88 followers. You too, brother. Don't let the winter kick your ass. We have rainy season. We don't have snow. Peace out.